Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, which is available for pre-order if you follow the link in the show notes below. And at that same link, you can pre-order the softcover edition of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. So today we're talking about All-Star Batman and Robin by Frank Miller and Jim Lee with Scott Williams and Alex Sinclair. DC was putting out a series of All-Star comics. It's unclear what the intention was. It was sort of promoted as like an introduction to these characters and these comics for people who were maybe not as immersed in comics history, making something that's like very accessible. And there was an All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. There was this, and then there was supposed to be an All-Star Wonder Woman, but the Batman and Robin seemed to falter, and the Wonder Woman never materialized. I am a fan of All-Star Batman and Robin. I think there's a lot going on here. I think it's a very misunderstood and mischaracterized comic, and so in this series, I'm going to give it a critical reappraisal, one issue at a time. And so this is a big deal. Frank Miller, this comics legend, someone I'm an immense fan of, and someone who I think Jim Lee is an immense fan of as well. And Jim Lee being, one of the top comics pencilers and, one of the executives at DC. It's a pairing that should be sort of an instant hit. I don't know the sales. My recollection is that this was a very poorly received series, but it still might have been successful sales-wise. I don't know. It kind of fell apart and was never concluded. And both creators have sort of, gone on to their own things. I was a little disappointed that Frank Miller himself wasn't going to draw this. And Jim Lee is sort of drawing on some Frank Miller isms and bringing some of that to it. When I was first introduced to Frank Miller, which, would have been in like the late 80s, early 90s, he had built up this body of work where I didn't really think of him as an artist. That was sort of how he started. He started as a penciler, but by the late 80s, early 90s, he had sort of become, he was in my mind a writer first and an artist second, and so I was discovering his work on Batman Year One with David Mazzucchelli, Elektra Assassin with Bill Sienkiewicz. He was sort of all over the place and doing the Give Me Liberty series with Dave Gibbons, Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot with Jeff Darrow. So, I did think of him more, from a writer perspective than an artist perspective. But, as the years go on and then, you have Sin City and 300 and learn more about him, I became more immersed in sort of his artwork. So it is like, I always want to see Frank Miller write and draw for himself, but he's doing what he wants to do. And of course, like Jim Lee was jumping at the chance to work with him. Frank Miller's a legend. Jim Lee's a legend too, but, to have the two of them team up on something that's one way that the All-Star name is very apropos for this. And so what we get is we've seen Batman Year One, where Miller, tells the story of Batman's beginnings. And then we saw, Dark Knight Returns, where we see the story of Batman's ending. And then we got Dark Knight Strikes Again, where it's like Batman's rebirth for a new century, where Bruce Wayne is just completely devoured by the end of Dark Knight Returns. And so by the beginning of Dark Knight Strikes Again, all that's left is Batman. So what we get here is the origin of Robin, the introduction of Robin. It's like another piece of the puzzle that we haven't gotten from, Frank Miller's Batman. And there's certain things that are like implied by those other series that Dark Knight Strikes Again, and to a lesser extent, Dark Knight Returns implies a falling out between Batman and Robin. But these are their good days. These are their happy days. And so we get this shot of Dick Grayson as one of the flying Graysons, and a lot of things in this comic and some of the sort of stranger turns that it takes are cues from those original Golden Age comics. And Miller comes from comics fandom. He was a huge comics fan. He was part of, the early, fandom community. And so, he's well-versed in all these old comics. And so, some of the stranger bits are from the original works, and he's definitely referencing them. And so we get, the Flying Graysons, which we've kind of seen in Batman Forever, the sort of big screen adaptation. And having Vicki Vale in the story also makes it feel like it's sort of tied to the big screen Batman. I haven't read very many Batman comics featuring Vicki Vale. This is one of the few. I always sort of got the impression that Vicki Vale was a creation for the movies, sort of, giving Batman a Lois Lane, since Batman didn't have that. His romantic interests were the original Batwoman from the 50s, and Julie Madison from like the earliest issues, and Catwoman. Those were sort of the ones that were set, but he didn't really have like a Lois Lane, and I guess like for the movies they felt he needed one. And I think Vicki Vale was introduced in the comics first, but that she was a creation for the movies, and then was sort of backloaded into the comics before the movie came out. But I mean, I may be correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong about that. If she did exist before the movies were sort of envisioned, she was certainly a minor character. And so we get, he just feels very safe and very happy as part of, his family, the Flying Graysons with his mom and dad. And so then we get Vicki Vale getting ready for her date with Bruce Wayne, and she's very excited. Like she's very excited about the idea of being with Bruce Wayne. And we get a lot of snappy patter, and she becomes, in the early issues of this series, she becomes a little bit of like a comedy duo with Alfred. Alfred's sort of, modeled on John Gielgud from the Arthur movies, Miller's Alfred. And so he is sort of a droll, sort of comedic figure. And we get this double-page splash of her trying on all kinds of outfits. And there's I'm having a date with Bruce Wayne. I'm having a date with Bruce Wayne. I'm having a date with Bruce Wayne. There's like a rhythm to the writing. There's a staccato and a cadence, and of course that was one of the things that was sort of criticized. Like, what are they paying Miller for? He's just writing the same, bad sentence over and over. But I didn't see it that way at all. I saw it as he's creating a rhythm, and his writing. He's got a style, and he's got an urgency that you don't typically see in mainstream comic book writing. This story, it's going in unexpected places and taking unexpected turns, and it is, you are in the hands of an artist. Even his lesser works, he's taking chances and bringing a real voice to. And this sort of sets you in like the era that we're in. We have a Got Milk ad with the first of the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Batman movies. I'm having a date with Bruce Wayne. How cool is that? And I think, Miller is trying to, remain current. And so at this point, it's like, he's trying to make like a Paris Hilton style socialite. But these things are surface. There's a lot of like, what's the surface and what's the actual like depth of the person? And we see that as a recurring thing throughout this series with Batman, with Dick Grayson, and so we get some nice, Miller-style compositions with the Flying Graysons, and he falls, and Vicki Vale's like, oh my God, don't worry, darling, this kid knows what he's doing. Bruce Wayne has come here to scout for talent. He sort of heard about this Flying Graysons kid, and he thinks that this guy might be somebody he could recruit into his war on crime, turn his one-man war on crime into a one-man, one-child war on crime. Dick Grayson has like a little grappling hook that he throws up. It's a grappling hook that is scalloped with bat wings, which I don't know, that seemed like an odd choice to me. I would figure, he could have a grappling hook, but maybe he doesn't get one with bat wings until he joins up with Batman. But maybe Bruce Wayne, scouting this guy out, sent him, mailed him a grappling hook to sort of get the hang of and play with or whatever. So I don't, maybe it's implying that. And yeah, he saves himself. And just the, the rhythm of this issue with, the splash pages seem very well chosen, very decompressed. In the first, 3 or 4 issues, it's not terribly dense with like plot or with incidences, but when it's somebody like Frank Miller and he's teamed up with a name brand talent like Jim Lee, you get the two of those guys together, and it's like, I feel like the audience should, cut them as much slack as possible. And I'm willing to go on this ride with them and spend my, I don't know, $6 or whatever per issue, as this story, slowly unfolds, I don't think a lot of the comics reading public was in that same boat. And again, I'm having a date with Bruce Wayne. Hot damn. They're taking their bow, and then boom, boom. The first sort of like big surprise in the established origin, their deaths are, when they're swinging on the trapeze, the bad guys have put like acid on the ropes, and so they fall to their deaths. But here it's I think it's a nice fake out. You think you might see a falling death in those previous pages. You don't. Everything's okay, and then they get shot. It's very like a blunt instrument, and we get this echo of the composition from Batman Year One. That Dick Grayson has gone through more or less the exact same thing that Bruce Wayne went through. We have a lot of different internal monologues, and so now we switch back to Bruce Wayne's watching it, and so Bruce Wayne's there scouting for talent, and I feel like that's a cue from the original Robin origin story, from way back in the day, because when this accident happens, Batman is right there on the spot, and it's kind of like, okay, how did Batman get there so fast unless he was in the audience? And why would he be in the audience unless it's some strange coincidence? Is there a reason? And so this is the reason Miller gives. Then you get sort of like dirty cops. There's something rotten in Gotham City. It wears a badge. That was sort of like a shocking element of this story, was how it's like, Batman is at war with the police in here, and that Dick Grayson is going to get killed by these police officers. And again, that's in the original Robin origin, from I think 1940 or 1939. Batman tells him, Dick Grayson's like, I'm going to call the police. And Batman's like, don't. The police in Gotham are owned by Boss Zuko. I'm going to help you get your revenge. You're not safe with them in Gotham City. And so, again, so that element's straight from there. And then, Miller's larger Batman Year One, Boss Zuko is part of that. So it's putting the whole thing together. And Vicki and Alfred pair up and go for. We get these like sort of flying cars that are part of Miller's bag of tricks, and Jim Lee's doing his version of that. And the police are telling Dick Grayson, settle down, son. You're in good hands. You're safe. Nobody's safe. Now don't go talking crazy, boy. It's like I've been telling you. I know you're pretty shook up, but that's no reason to talk crazy. They're bringing him out into the woods to kill him. And Vicki Vale's driving and snapping pictures at the car. And now a bunch of bats show up. And they were sent by Batman. And the Batmobile drives through and slices a police car in half. This Batman comic, Batman doesn't show up until the final page, the big splash page. You've just been drafted into a war to be continued. So, way to end an issue. Just really very exciting, high drama. I'm on board. I want to find out what comes next. I have a lot of questions, and these are all good things in an ongoing drama, especially when it's an established creator who has this this reputation, and I'm ready for the ride. And so you're going to see a lot more of the Batmobile in the next issue. I'm a huge fan of car action in comics. It's rare that it's really done well, but I think Miller is one of the better practitioners of that art. So I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and you can pre-order that book by clicking on the link in the show notes below. And at that same link, you can pre-order the softcover edition of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I'll see you next time.